Okay, we'd like to say welcome, and I admire Gary Holloway challenging 500 years of Calvinism and 300 years of utilitarianism. I must admit that a lot of that hit home with me because I have learned to take naps, and they are very, very refreshing, but it took me a while. To learn them, I felt guilty somehow, like I should apologize to somebody for taking one. But that is a great gift, and I appreciate Gary sharing that with us. Well, our dog friend today, one of the reasons I like to put a dog up is I know I have the right first slide for my show because I have different dogs. I don't use the same dog for each presentation. I'm sort of like Jay Leno on this. I'm not sure dogs really enjoy wearing clothing like this. I don't really know. But, you know, that's for another day for us to worry about. Today I want to get into something in Galatians 5 and hopefully, if we have time, finish up the fruit of the Spirit. But let's look at something a little unusual. I was reading one of the magazines I read regularly is called Wired. I don't recommend it to everybody, but it's a magazine in touch with the sort of the cutting edge of technology and ideas, and a little off the wall. They come up with things I'd never thought about, such as how many books have been written with the title "That Changed the World" in it somewhere. And it's an amazing number of books have been written by people who believe that a certain invention or a certain product or a certain development changed the world. And maybe it did, I don't know. I suppose anything changed the world. If you sneeze and somebody gets a cold and dies of respiratory illness, I guess you changed the world in some small way. But anyway, it's interesting to see how many people believe the topic they picked changed the world. Okay, number one on the list was the diesel engine. The diesel engine changed the world. I suppose by populating our highways with lots of good semis and with these huge trucks that move things, and maybe we're all better off somehow. Next on the list was charcoal. I'm still trying to figure this one out, but it's supposed to have changed the world. And maybe you could help me, maybe the people who make it, so that you could incinerate your hot dogs or hamburgers, believe it changed the world. But a whole book has been written on this. Charcoal, it changed the world. Codfish also has supposedly changed the world. In what way, I'm not really sure, except maybe it did keep Captain D's afloat for a while. So we don't know how it managed to change the world. But, you know, you can see how this develops. Sugar, well, I think I agree with this. The discovery of sugar. And the name of the book is The Grass That Changed the World, Sugar. And I guess sugar is, if you've been out of Louisiana seeing sugar plantation, you know, it looks like big, tall grass sometimes, but it's canes. Well, anyway, except for sugar beets, which are different, obviously. And then there's sugar that comes in a package, as you get at Cracker Barrel, and that's different too, okay. But I've heard how sugar does change the behavior of children. In fact, at camp for every year, some of our very good people, Lyra Bennett kind of led this. She'd bring out cases of apples because she was convinced, and maybe rightly so, I don't know, that if you gave kids candy, they'd be hyperactive. And so she brought apples along to slow them down a little bit. I think the kids are already hyperactive. I'm not sure that the candy had a lot to do with it. Maybe it did. I'm not going to get an argument on that with you people, so don't worry. But I suppose sugar changed the world. Container shipping. Now, this really was a revelation to me, but they say it changed the world, the way we ship on ship. Okay. And Apple computers and Steve Jobs have changed the way we process information. And maybe all this is true. And this is the one I really like. 50 kinds of shoes have changed the world, depending. Because you can jump higher now, and you can kill the other guy to get that 500 pair of sneakers from him, which goes on quite a bit. You'd be surprised. And maybe they're even talking about women's shoes. I'm not sure what that's all about. And how this has changed the world, I'm not sure. So imagine all the things that people have thought about have been so significant that they changed the world. Now, if you were to approach the Apostle Paul and say, Paul, what do you think changed the world? Do you think it's the Roman conquest? Do you think it's the Jews defeating Antiochus Epiphanes, do you think what? And I believe he would have said, what I believe has changed this old planet of ours that's been world-changing and even has overtones, huge overtones for eternity itself, is this: Christ crucified. Now, Paul, I believe, would have been right on that. That has made all the difference. All the difference in the way you think about religion, and all the way you think about God, all the way you think about all that's important. This is the earth-changing action of God. And I have to agree with him, because he obviously centers on that. So I then understand why he's bothered by people who suddenly decide that, yeah, that's nice, and we appreciate it, but we really, when you get right down to it, religion is a do-it-yourself proposition. It's a matter of you working and doing these things and accomplishing these things and making sure that you do all the right things. And now all the emphasis falls away from the cross as insignificance. Now the center is on human beings. So I don't know why he says that's what changed the world. Now, when we talk then about God and Christ, and we find the mechanism for our Christian work, as it were, productivity, is really the Holy Spirit. Now, because under this dynamic, we find that God himself is inspiring us and encouraging us to make good things happen. That it doesn't generate from us and our power and our ability and our charisma, but rather from God himself. And when you think about this, the productive life, we've looked at this a lot, and it's good to look at it again, because I think when Paul sat down to write this letter to the Galatians, he's obviously very angry, and rightly so, at the way the cross was being demoted in their thinking. And so as he develops now the rationale for the Christian life, and it's a productive life, he tries to tell them. It's not one of a lot of demands and a lot of legalism and a lot of you got to do this and you must, should, ought. I'm just kind of where I don't enjoy the must, should, ought approach a lot anymore. Somebody says, you must, you ought, you should. Yeah, well, maybe I should, but that doesn't quite work. I need a little better perspective than that. I need something that goes beyond duty, as it were. And that's where the Holy Spirit, I think, comes in. So when Paul wrote, I think, now, de carpus tu pneumatos estin agape kara erene, that is, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. And then he ends up with the triad I hope to get to today: faith and gentleness and inner mastery. Now, it's interesting to me that at the outset of this, in the fruit of the Spirit, that he uses the word faith. Now, I would expect that he would have used the word faithfulness rather than faith, because we assume faith. And how can we talk about faith as a gift or as a production of the Spirit in our lives? Well, when you begin to reflect on that, maybe something like Ephesians 2 comes to mind, where Paul says that we're not saved by work, but by grace, and that it's not of ourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. Well, what does he mean when he says this is the gift of God? What does the this refer to? Well, the odd thing is that faith itself is a feminine noun, and grace is a feminine noun, and this is a neuter. So when you use a neuter and a neuter noun, it's sort of like a collection. It's the whole thing. It's the whole package, the whole works, as it were. And so all of that, faith, grace, forgiveness, salvation, is a gift of God, the whole thing. Now, I don't think we have a problem with grace or salvation being a gift of God, but faith, isn't that something finally we can reserve to ourselves? This is what we do. We have faith, and then God reciprocates. And all of a sudden he's talking about faith being a gift. Faith being something God's responsible for. Now we say, yeah, but there were some people that got a hold of this and they kind of went to an extreme with it, and the extreme represented what's called the direct operation of the Holy Spirit, in which God ahead of time picked out certain people to be saved, certain people to be condemned. Those are the elect and the non-elect. You really had no choice. It was entirely God's choice. And we don't know whether the way that worked, but it worked that way, and that's sovereign grace of God chose you and didn't choose you, and that's tough because you're predestined to go to hell whether you like it or not, and you're predestined to be saved whether you like it or not. And so then, in order for that to work, God has to operate on you directly through the Holy Spirit and convert you. And that's called Calvinism. And it's still prominent today in many, many groups. But when we read the Bible and we read things like, God so loved the world that he gave his only son that whoever, well, we're a really serious problem with that theology, because it seems as if it's so unbelievably irrational or so unbelievably out of sight of the nature of the God who chooses to bless all, that we it's really don't understand how people can accept it. And so I'm talking about faith as a gift. Well, think of it this way. What would you have faith in if God had not acted or sent Jesus into the world? So obviously, he's talking about the potential the Holy Spirit gives you to appreciate and to receive Jesus. That the Holy Spirit amplifies your capacity to receive Jesus. Now, back years ago, television came out. Yeah. Television. And most of us are of an age where we remember television being relatively primitive. Maybe you had a little 9-inch black and white set, and everybody in your neighborhood came over to see it because you're the only one that had it. I've seen situations where 20 people would crowd into a living room to watch a football game on a screen no bigger than about 9 inches diagonal, with little fuzzy black and white figures that you couldn't make out whether it was the Nutcracker Ballet or Notre Dame. In order to enhance our viewing experience, we had rabbit ears, which many of you don't know what, are based not upon the rabbit having ears that stick up in the air, where the ears are made out of metal. And then someone said, well, you know, if you put aluminum foil on them, they'll do better. You'll receive. So you'd come in the living room with most people, and there'd be a rabbit ears up there on top, and there'd be this little aluminum flags hanging off. Now, they had to be done a certain way. And you'd sit down there and you'd say to somebody, don't move or you'll mess the picture up. Or somebody get up, get a drink of water. Oh, you screwed the picture up, you know. People today, they got cable, they got satellite. They complain if there's even the hint of a ghost of a fuzziness. But now, I think you can sort of there's an analogy there with legalism, it's like you're using rabbit ears with God, you know? And you're just always having to adjust it manually to get a good picture of God. Because that's the best legalism can do. It just can't help you envision God. But the Holy Spirit doesn't really come to give you better experiences than the next person so that you can brag about your spirituality. What the Spirit wants to come and do is to open up for you receptivity to Jesus. In fact, there's a beautiful quote by a German scholar named Edward Schweitzer who says, the Holy Spirit makes us receptive to Jesus. So I think that's what Paul's trying to say here is the qualities and the characteristics of Jesus can become real in our lives only if we have an openness to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is not there but to help you. And that's why he's called the helper or the consoler. Or maybe even better, the encourager, which is a pretty good way to translate parakletos, I think, the encourager. So we need all the help we can get. I don't know about you, but I need all the help. And I don't want to be getting up every 2 seconds, adjusting the picture. And so I want the best that God has provided. Now, faith then must mean our potential to be even more receptive to Jesus in this sense. Potential. Now, you remember Charlie Brown, Peanuts, and all that, right? Everybody's read that. Snoopy, the whole bunch of characters. There's a little boy named Linus, and he's the theologian. His theology is a little off. Like he believes in pumpkins that rise up into the pumpkin patch. And he has a strange theology, but he quotes the Bible a lot. Well, not tremendously, but every now and then he has good things to say. One strip I saw not long ago was Charlie Brown was ashamed of his scribbling and that he didn't think he had good penmanship. And Linus quoted to him out of Galatians, "See with what large letters I write to you," justifying his scribbling. You know. It's a little shaky theology here, all right, but I mean, he's trying. But Linus did say something very profound one day, or Charlie Schultz did, I guess, through Linus. He said, "There is no greater burden than a great potential," you know, because you're going to have that thrown at you all your life by people. Well, I would have expected a better paper out of you. Why? Well, you have such potential. Oh, okay. Well, I thought someone with your potential would have done better. You see what I mean? And really, none of us can live up to our potential. But suppose we had help from the Creator to actualize our potential. And this is called faith. The development of our faith gets us out of those ruts we get into and develops creatively our faith, you see. So that's kind of a neat idea. Another idea, and I love this analogy, of the Spirit creating a community of faith. So we have potential to create a community of faith. In other words, there's something strong about a whole community of faith. So people come in and they become part of our community, and there's so much faith in that community that it's kind of contagious. And it's upbuilding. And they don't come in and they don't say, "Well, I love those people because they have great architecture," or "Those are really neat people because they travel in the best." And I look in the parking lot and see their vehicles and I want to be one of them. Have you felt the faith that's there? That Holy Spirit wants to create a community of faith. And that will be a way to change the world. But then we began into this, well, you know, Bob, this is all very nice and everything, but I don't really have a very strong faith, I don't think. But suppose I said to you that's irrelevant. The strength of your faith is irrelevant. Because the Holy Spirit is going to help us realize the strength of our faith means nothing, but the object of our faith means everything. I'll try to illustrate it. Think of it as a growth thing. It doesn't look like much. It doesn't look like it has any potential at all. But yet, every oak tree, every plant that ever existed started out this way. Huge investments are made so that it will grow and produce fruit, as we need to. And we may think of ourselves in this very fragile state, but it is God's will for us that we grow and produce. So what I'm trying to say is you just can't sit around. The most dangerous thing you can do as a Christian is play it safe. See, that's what the one-talent man did. "Lord, you have what was yours. I knew you were a difficult person to deal with, Lord." "Oh, yeah? Is that what you heard? How come I blessed the guy with the 10 talents? Or how come I blessed the guy with the 5 talents? I'd have blessed you too if you'd have let me. You wouldn't let me bless you. You held on to it. You conserved it. You stuck it in the ground." Not a smart thing to do. Now, you can't just sit around. You need to let the Spirit begin producing fruit in your life. And you say, "Well, the way that faith develops in me will really help me with this because I do need a stronger faith, Bob, and what in spite of what you said." Okay, well, all right. Well, let's think about it a minute, okay? It's just not growth that we want, is it? You know, just growth per se. How much will does poison ivy have, you know? to grow. Strong. It's hard to eradicate, right? Poison ivy obviously believes in itself. But you don't want to tangle up with it, right? What's that old saying about leaves of three, et cetera, poison sumac, poison oak, poison ivy? If you've ever had a tangle with this stuff, you know not everything that grows and is green is good. So, yes, faith is necessary for good growth, obviously. So I want to say this. It's not the strength of your faith that will cause the good growth and not the poison ivy. It's not the strength of your faith. It's the object of your faith. If you have really strong faith in a weak bridge, you're just going to get killed. Here's a sign I ran into. I like the sign. What does this mean? Well, it means weak bridge. Well, how much more effort would it have taken to build the bridge up a little stronger as to put the sign up? Right? We're Americans put the sign up, that takes care of it legally, right? We call that a disclaimer. So if you get killed, it's your fault. Disclaimers are on everything, aren't they? You buy a box of graham crackers, warning, it's not our fault if you get fat. You can't sue us. There's disclaimers on everything. I buy a video game and it said, warning, watching this video game may make you dizzy. No, it made me mad. So, what's 10 persons are equivalent? What's the equivalent of 10 persons? Like one person and an elephant? I mean, that is a really vague language, you know. So, do not use this as a viewing guide. Don't stand around the bridge, keep moving onward. Don't make your house on the bridge, and that's pretty good advice because you don't need to do that. Now, here's my all-time favorite bridge. This is in Pakistan, by the way, at the Zola River, and this is the bridge they have to cross, the people have to cross. Suppose you have very strong faith in this bridge, so you decide to walk across it. And you've been eating a little more than you should, and you've got your whole family with you, and they've been doing the same. What are the odds you're going to make it to the other side? You say, well, I have strong faith, so that will guarantee that I make it. No, it may guarantee you get killed. You understand what I'm driving at here? Okay. However, if you look at it this way, even weak faith in a strong bridge will get you across. Now, what's the benefit of this? Even weak faith that takes a chance or a risk or trusts itself to God is bound to do what? Get stronger. Strong faith in and of itself is of no value. Even weak faith in someone strong will increase. So the Holy Spirit wants to help you understand that you can make the choices that lead you to depending more on Jesus than what you do and have done and accomplished. And in that way, your faith will get stronger. But you begin putting faith in yourself and what you can do and what you can accomplish and what you can make happen, you're just going to finally give up because that's just not a good object of faith. Okay, well, yeah, all right. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so we think about that a minute. So I want my faith to be in the Lord. And now I understand faith here as productive in my life because it causes me to grow in good ways. It develops a community of faith, and it helps all the potential God has given me to come to fruition. And that's why Jesus cursed the fig tree, because so much potential, no blessings. And that just seems to bother God a lot. He created that fig tree to bless people, not just to sit there as an ornament or as a Christmas tree. Well, moving on to the next of the final two fruit of the Spirit that Paul talks about, they're kind of related. In fact, I think they're very strongly related, to be honest with you. And the first one is, of course, gentleness. Prautes. Now, this verb is, this noun is translated often meekness. In fact, universally in the King James, you'll see, blessed are the meek. Well, this is the same term, the gentle. Now, this word has an interesting history. It may sound like weakness. But what it really means is handle with care. Some things are too valuable to be broken, including hearts. Gentle person is a strong person whose strength is under control. It's not just indiscriminately cut loose. It doesn't spill over everywhere. It means that there are some people that must be handled gently. Now, someone has said they could tame lions, and that may be true. However, I'm not going to get in a cage with one even if they say it's tame, because he may not have had enough to eat, and I may look like a treat, although I don't think I'd look like much to a lion, but still, you never know. They could be a little nearsighted. I've heard other people say wolves can be trained and they make good pets. I'm not so sure, you know. Maybe, but this word prautes, is used in a context in the ancient world to mean to tame something very strong. So that if you did tame a wolf, that wolf would be called this prautes wolf. This tame wolf would be this wolf with enormous strength under control somehow. Not acting wolf-like, or the lion, or even a bear. Now people dance with these bears, they do. They train them. And we need people like that, I suppose, foolish people. They're fun to watch, as long as you're behind a cage. I don't know, but they say this can be done. But imagine a bear tamed, a huge bear, weighs 800 pounds, tamed. Doesn't look too tame to me, but that would be strength under control at the max. Now, what they often use this metaphor for were these horses that were trained to do battle. Because the horse doesn't necessarily want to do battle, and if the horse is taken and the strength of the horse becomes one that the horse can be used as pull the chariot of the Pharaoh or whatever, or go into battle with the warrior, they said of this horse, he is a praetus horse. He is a beast with great strength that has been put to good use. So the word for gentleness doesn't mean some milquetoast kind of character, some weakling, someone who doesn't really have any manliness or womanliness about them, no character at all, just a kind of pushover type. They are people who know how to control their strength, and it takes the Holy Spirit to do that. We're just not really capable ourselves, you see. So with the help of the Spirit, we're able to control ourselves. Now, I don't think it's without any particular coincidence that the next quality connects to this one, because it's kind of the same thing, only looking at it from the inside rather than the outside, so to speak. And that's inner mastery. Now, this is actually put together two Greek words, okay? The preposition in, which means the same thing in English that it does in Greek, inner, in. Now, when the nu comes before a kappa, it turns to a gamma, okay? It's a Greek lesson for today. That's why it's enkrateia. You would expect it to be a nu, but it always switches to a gamma rather, before a kappa. Okay, well, I'll be on the test, all right. Now, enkrateia. Okay, inner, krateia means strength, okay? Kratos is power and strength. Democracia, what would that mean, anybody? What is demos in Greek? People. What is krasia? Power. So democracy means what? The people are in power, supposedly. Democracia. People, power. Enkrateia, inner power. Inner mastery. Now, who do you think the hardest person in the world to say no to is? Well, my wife's pretty hard to say no to, but there's one even harder. Moi. As Miss Piggy says, moi. And I decide I need something. I'm incredibly good at rationalizing. I now recognize that, but it hasn't stopped me particularly. Well, I'm working. And others are working on me as well. But hard to say no to self. Inner mastery is the most difficult. And so no wonder we need the help of the Spirit. We can't do it with legalism. We can't do it with rules. It's going to take something far beyond that. So inner mastery. Now, the thing is, I believe the reason for this is you can spend so much energy and so much time if you're not under control. So much energy can be wasted. And if you don't believe it, just look at churches that have wasted enormous energy fighting among themselves. Enormous energy that could have been turned to much better purposes. What's lacking is inner mastery in that fellowship. We say self-control, it's not quite the same thing. Aristotle used to say, if a person cannot master himself, he deserves to lead no one. It's not a bad saying. So we fight in our culture against controlling ourselves because we connect that with being a victim, putting up with things, enduring, and we're just not going to take that anymore, is our motto. So a psychiatrist I was reading who helps people in anger management and things like that came up with 7 misunderstandings or 7 wrong ideas that people who don't have much self-control in the way they think that defeats them over and over again. And number 1 on the list, he said, was, I can't help it. It's someone else's fault. A number of years ago, I may share this. Well, anyway, let's just say this. There was a situation where about a 6'6", 300-pound husband was regularly beating up a 5'2", 100-pound wife. And he said to her, I wouldn't do this if you didn't make me so mad. It's all your fault. As far as I know, this guy went down to his grave that way. Now, I'm sure he knows much better. Much better. It's someone else's fault. If I could just find somebody to blame, you see, for my failings, I can't help it. Well, the Holy Spirit comes to you and says, I'll help you. I'll help you with this. I can help you with this. I can get you close to God, and you can draw your strength from God. You can draw your control from God. And it said of Moses, he was the most meek of all men, and I think that meant he couldn't have been a great leader if he'd have blown up every time something happened. He pretty well almost always prayed when something bad happened. Lord, and that may be the way in which we keep in touch with the Spirit. The second thing that happens is you can't be angry without exploding. Oh, yes, you can. You can be angry without exploding. Anger informs you, but what you're doing is letting your anger turn to rage. And rage and anger are very different. Anger informs you that something's not, boundaries been stepped on, something's been gone wrong, somebody's being abused, something's being exploited here, and there are some things should make you angry if you're a real human being. You shouldn't sit back and say, well, it's okay. If they want to mistreat their child, that's their business, right? I don't have any. It should make you angry. But now if you fly off into a rage, then that anger has lost all its meaning and purpose. And you've gone out of control. But people say that. You can't really express your anger if you don't go into rage. Well, that's not true. And there's where the Holy Spirit comes to help you, because the Holy Spirit will help you to understand, let your anger do the work it needs to do. And what did Paul say? Remember, don't let the sun go down on your anger. What's he saying? He says it's okay to be angry. Just set some limits to it. You don't let the sun go down. A legalist, of course, would say I can be mad at you till 6 o'clock tonight. But biblically, I believe it means realistically set some limits on your anger. And then, as you begin to move along here, actually the psychiatrists tell us that people who blow up a lot cannot live with frustration. They can't handle being frustrated. And so they don't have a creative answer. When somebody cuts them off in traffic, the only thing they can think of is, I'm going to show you safe driving, dude. And so they react because they can't handle their frustrations. They can't talk them out or work with. The Spirit, I believe, has helped me many times with my frustration. But I want to tell you, being a minister can be very frustrating sometimes. But then being what you are can be very frustrating, can it not? And is there anyone in the room who hasn't at times just felt so frustrated you just wanted to give up? But you didn't. Why? Maybe the Spirit came to your aid and helped you get through that frustration. It's how we feel so powerless sometimes at what's going on in the world. It's more important to win than to be right. Well, yes, we all know about that. Now, this one I like. Show some respect. Well, respect means, to me, you do it my way. You're disrespecting me if you do it some other way. Of course, this will get you in a heap of trouble. And the way to make things right is to fight. You say, well, we don't do that in the church. Not much, huh? Now, of course, he points out that a lot of people who fight all the time have learned that from their childhood because that's the way mom and dad always reacted to things. And so that's normal behavior for them to act that way. And you see, what's really going on here is the Holy Spirit helps us challenge the behavior that we're engaging in. And finally, and I don't know if it's a definitive list or not, but it's been helpful to me, and you may actually have some good ideas too. When it's all said and done and the dust settles, this is what you normally hear. You ought to know I really didn't mean it. I was just mad. That excuses everything, right? It excuses me hitting you. It excuses me blowing up. It excuses me acting like an idiot in the restaurant last week. It excuses the way I treated that other driver. I didn't really mean it. Oh, yes, you did. Just be honest for a change. You have learned to behave that way because you have found it to be normal. But it's the most unproductive way you can live. And not only is it unproductive, it keeps you from having your potential realized. Self-mastery, then, is an outstanding way in which we demonstrate the work of the Spirit in our lives. And that's what it's all about, being productive. So, thanks for being here, folks. God bless each one of you.